On November 24th of 1971, Northwest Airlines Flight 305 took off from Portland, Oregon, bound for Seattle. One of the passengers had purchased his ticket under the name of Dan Cooper. A journalist later misheard the name pronounced, and the moniker D.B. Cooper stuck. The nondescript Caucasian male looked relaxed, sipping on his bourbon and soda. Suddenly, he beckoned to cabin flight attendant Florence Schaffner, asking her to sit next to him in the empty seat. Cooper then told her that he had a bomb on the plane, and he opened his case to show her several red sticks wired together. Cooper calmly explained to her how the bomb worked, and said he had a list of demands. He instructed Schaffner to write down a note of his demands and hand it to the pilot. She took it straight to the cockpit. The demands were simple. Upon arriving in Seattle, the man wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, plus 4 parachutes. The pilot immediately contacted air traffic control and informed them of the situation. While arrangements were hastily made, he had to keep the plane circling Seattle. The flight was only supposed to take about 40 minutes, but hijacking kept them up in the air for more than 2 hours. Finally, they were able to make it to Seattle and land the plane without incident. When the plane touched down, Cooper allowed all of the passengers to disembark, but ordered some of the crew cabin to remain with him on the plane. His money and parachutes were brought to him. Satisfied, Cooper then ordered the plane to take off again, this time for Mexico City. He agreed to a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada, and the aircraft was soon away again. He next mandated they fly at the slowest possible speed and asked for the rear exit staircase to be kept open for takeoff. When the flight crew told him it was too dangerous, he insisted it was possible before agreeing to close it during takeoff. When the plane was in the air, Cooper told the second cabin attendant Tina Mucklow to show him the rear door. Mucklow then showed him how to open the ladder to the exit before Cooper ordered everyone back to the cockpit. He'd now tied the money to his body with a rope from one of the parachutes and jumped out of the plane. He took with him 2 parachutes in the bag of money. D.B. Cooper was never seen again, and the hijacking remains a cold case. Which leaves us with the obvious question: did he even survive? It was an incredibly difficult jump to attempt, pitch black dark with almost zero visibility over thick forests, and dressed in a suit and light shoes. However, no trace of his parachute has ever been found. Some children stumbled across a ripped parachute that had been buried in sand in lower Washington state, but alas, it was different from the type that Cooper had used. In 1980, a young boy was playing near a river in Washington state when he came across a decaying, tattered bunch of $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the bills given to Cooper, and the total amounted to $5,800. But other than that, no other money's been recovered. If, and this is a big if he did survive and is still alive, Cooper would most likely be in his 90s. But another possibility is that he also might have survived and has since died. Cooper jumped out of the plane at around 8 o'clock at night. The terrain below the plane was clustered with forests, and Cooper was hardly dressed for the occasion. Furthermore, at that height, the winds would have been in excess of 200 kilometers an hour, and his parachutes were Army issue, meaning that they couldn't be steered. However, no parachutes were recovered, none of, well, not much of the money, and no clothing. This strongly suggested to investigators that Cooper had somehow survived the jump and made off with the loot. They then turned their attention back to the flight and began interviewing the flight crew. Several things were clear. First of all, Cooper seemed familiar with aircraft procedures and layouts. He knew about the rear exit and that planes could take off with the ladder open. He also knew an area and had pointed out several landmarks, such as military bases during the initial flight to Seattle. This suggested that Cooper had some kind of military experience. If not a paratrooper, then he certainly seemed familiar with the basics of jumping from planes. Added to that, it took a certain kind of nerve to attempt such a hijacking, and an ex-soldier would undoubtedly have been through his share of intense situations. The FBI began focusing their search on men with military backgrounds who had criminal records or were perhaps disillusioned, with motives to attempt a hijacking. They set up a manhunt named Norjack for Northwestern Hijack, and they were to end up investigating more than 1,000 men. Over the following years, they were able to identify several more likely suspects, all of whom were eventually cleared. An early candidate was Robert Rackstraw. Rackstraw was a decorated Army paratrooper with a criminal record who had been discharged from the Army. While he certainly would have had the ability to fly the parachute to safety or guide it, whatever, Rackstraw was eventually cleared because he was deemed to be too young at the time of Cooper's hijacking. Cabin crew and fellow passengers estimated Cooper to be in his late 30s and early 40s. Richard McCoy was another prime candidate, and for good reason. In April 1972, McCoy had carried out a hijacking of his own, in the same exact manner as Cooper. He'd commandeered a Boeing and escaped with cash via the rear exit by parachute, just as Cooper had. In fact, almost everything about McCoy's hijacking was the same as Cooper's. McCoy's and Cooper's both revealed their weapons to cabin attendants before demanding a note be sent to the cabin. Cooper used a bomb, McCoy had a grenade. Both men insisted on 4 parachutes and large amounts of cash. McCoy wanted $500,000, and both men sent cabin crew to the front of the plane before leaping out to the back with a parachute and the cash. Many investigators thought the similarities were just too close, had to be the same guy. However, McCoy was let go after it was clear that there were too many physical differences from him to be D.B. Cooper. Over the years, others have actually claimed to be D.B. Cooper. William Gossett was an ex-Marine parachutist and loosely resembled the man described as Cooper. Gossett told his son several times that he was responsible for a plane hijacking in 1971, but it simply didn't wash with the FBI. They doubted the legitimacy of his story, and his physical profile also differed from the description given. The police have ultimately just little to go on. Cooper did leave behind a black necktie with DNA traces, but they've never been matched. And as recently as 2018, yet another suspect has been identified. William J. Smith was a World War II veteran with combat air experience. Smith had also been laid off and was struggling for money. Plus, metal on Cooper's clip-on tie might have come from the aluminum plant where Smith worked. Unfortunately, Smith has since died, leaving us none the wiser. Like all great mysteries, everybody's got their own theory. Did Cooper survive? Is he still alive? Was one of the many suspects the real D.B. Cooper? So what do you think? Who was the real-life Dan Cooper?